Hey there, welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the Texas STAR system and learn about how to use it to look at score distributions and grades across different specialties for residency match. So firstly, you got to make sure you can log into the Texas STAR system. This video isn't going to cover that part, so we're going to really start off at this first dashboard where you start out. So you land here, you look at the page, and it's got a bunch of words and it's got a bunch of images, and you're just thinking, what is all of this mess? Well, I'm going to skip ahead and tell you, look down below. So if you follow my mouse here, down below across the bottom, there's a row of tabs. And so that's what we're going to use to do all of our navigation. We're on the Home tab right now. Let's start with going to STAR Search. So we click on that, we let it load up, and we can see here we have a listing of schools with columns of different application counts and step scores. And what we can do here is choose different specialties. So you can perhaps, when you first start this out, it will default to having everything selected, right? So what we see here is a listing of all of these programs who have opted into providing information to the Texas STAR search system. This is not a comprehensive listing. It's only the schools who have opted in. There are a number of notable programs that are missing, as well as programs that you may not have heard of. So it's a great way to discover programs, discover lots of data that way. So you can see here, some schools don't have certain programs, and so you can see that the data is kind of sparse. Now this data in and of itself may not be of particular use, right? Because it's across lots of specialties. It's got lots and lots of programs. And you can see down here we have, this is literally on the bottom, just all the data, right? So it's literally thousands of rows across different specialties. So I'm down to the internal medicine section. As I scroll a bit more, we're still in internal medicine because there's a lot of yellow. And now it's loading in more. You can see the scroll bar jumping up. Now we've moved on to surgery, etc., etc. Now what we can do is, let's say we're interested in family medicine, right? So we can click on, let's say, Baylor in Houston's family medicine program, and we can see here there's an application count of 103 with an average step 1 score of 219. So if I click on family medicine and Baylor, that intersection, we're going to give that a click. It's going to highlight that. Now we can see all of the applicants who are in who applied to family medicine at Baylor over the last few years. And so you can literally look them one by one. Now you'll see here, over here, there's this button. You can click that and you can focus in and kind of expand that table, because it is kind of tight to look at. And so now we can really take a look at what this chart offers. This table tells you a number of really quite detailed statistics. We can check these out and we can see who got interview offers, whether or not they match, and this isn't this is referring to whether they matched that program specifically, right? So you can see people who got interview offers but didn't match there, people who didn't get interviews and of course didn't match there. Information like their step 1 score range, step 2 CK score range. You got things like peer review publications, whether they did a research year, and if we scroll on to the right, we can see things like abstracts, volunteer experiences, whether they passed their board exams on their first attempt or not, and of course the number of programs they apply to. So here we can see some examples of folks who apply to a ton of programs. Now, to be fair, it is sorted by programs applied, so it's going to be the biggest numbers on top. I just clicked that. So on the smaller end of things, we see folks who apply to just 11 or 12 programs. And you can also see their home region and home state. The regions, like this is Northeast. They're listed out. I think GSA is South. They're listed out on the Texas STAR website, so you can look at that for more information. We can take a look at that later. But for now, let's click back to the report. What else can we do with this? Well, we can say I only want to look at survey year 2018, right? 2017 is too old. Maybe the 2019 data is too sparse or too recent. And you can see it really cuts down on this table, right? It's really dropped it down. But really, let's say in our example, we want to care about family medicine. We want to unselect everything, click family medicine, and then we can see these now are all the programs in family medicine. And so from here, we could also narrow down and remove programs to just the ones we're interested in. We can say, I only want to see applicants who received an interview offer, right? I want to see what the profile of those who received interview offers for family medicine in 2018 were. And let's say I only care about folks who got step scores of 230 to 234 and down, maybe down to 215, maybe down to 210, right? So now we're narrowing it in. And maybe we say we want folks who didn't do an away rotation, because I didn't do an away rotation, so I want to compare like with like. And we can see different programs, the number of applicants who received interviews in 2018 with those score ranges that we specified. And of course, the step 1 average is going to be a little bit tighter since we specified our range ourselves, so that number is less meaningful. And you can scroll through here, or you can scroll through here, but you'll notice that through the direct list view, it's just kind of all over the place, right? You got different programs, and it's just kind of everywhere. And so it may be easier if you want to, kind of zoom in on a particular program and look at all of the applicants to that program. So let's say we want to look at UCLA Harbor, right? So we can click on that, give that a click, and now we're just seeing the UCLA ones. We're going to expand this again, and we can see lots of these results, right? These are, of course, everyone here is going to have had an interview offer because we filtered for that. But now we can sort by matched, and I see we sorted one way, now let's sort the other way. In this particular contrived example, nobody in 2018 who applied and got interviews matched. Now remember, that doesn't mean that nobody matched to UCLA. It's only applicants from programs who opted into the Texas STAR system. So, of course, people matched into UCLA's family medicine program. It's just that in 2018, those were the scores that we cared about with no away rotation and who were, who are in the Texas STAR system. They happen to not have received a match, and it might mean that they just matched somewhere else, right? They probably matched somewhere else where they preferred, and that's totally fine. So that's enough about this screen for now. Let's move on. Let's take a look back down at these tabs, and let's go on to the next tab, Summary by Specialty. Now, what is nice about the system is that it'll actually remember some of your selections. You'll notice that our step 1 score selections are remembered. Our interview offer checkbox is remembered. Now, some of the ones that we had selected before don't show up here, so of course there's nothing to remember. But you see the survey years here, as well as the specialty. So let's say for this example, instead of family medicine, let's choose something else. Let's choose obstetrics and gynecology, right? OBGYN, and we're going to look at this summary. And what's neat about this view is you can see for a given specialty kind of some interesting stats. So I'm going to erase. So you see here, there's a little eraser. If you mouse over it, you can just clear that option. So I want to say, I don't need to filter by step 1 score, and I don't need to filter by survey either. So let's say I want to look at OB, and I want to look at let's say pediatrics and just general surgery, right? Like some similar-ish type of specialties, because we can look at different specialties side by side and see their averages, right? Those who received interviews at these programs had these kinds of scores, these kinds of stats. And so that can be a very useful kind of way to get a better understanding of what performance folks have had. Now keep in mind, as always, Texas STAR system is not a full view of the NRMP match, right? It's only a subset. So let's move on to summary by program. Now this, as you might have guessed from summary by specialty, is a summary by program. So we already selected a couple of different specialties. Let's leave that be. And so within that, let's say we uncheck select all, and let's just select a handful, right? Let's, I don't know, let's say we pick Brown, and we pick, say, the Cleveland Clinic, and maybe another program. So you can see as we pick each one, what's cool is that not only does this chart not disappear, which would force us to kind of open it again and then click it again, it actually adds to it directly. It does scroll us back to the top, which is kind of unfortunate. Let's say Boston University, there's a program, and maybe here we can see not just the step scores, but also things like publications, presentations. It's rather similar, and you can click on one of these and it doesn't really do much because we don't have that detail view down below of the applicants. If you want that, you can actually have this clicked, right? We selected, say, Cleveland Clinic. If I go back to the STAR search, right back to that first tab we were on, Cleveland Clinic, that subset is selected. So it doesn't select the things you click on in the tables here, but it does preserve your filters on the left. So let's move on to the quartile / step 1 score. And you can basically explore your way through each of these, right? Here, the next couple are very similar charts. You can see these bubble graphs. And what we'll see is these are folks who received interviews. and this is broken down by quartile against their step score. So there's kind of, you can mouse over a given one, and you can see kind of these numbers, right? So there's a 0th quartile, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So 0 is, I believe, just means there's no information, and you can kind of see from the sizing of the bubbles, it's kind of just a normal distribution. And so if you ignore that, what is perhaps what you would expect is you'd see this quartile distribution against step scores, where generally the distribution shifts to the left, to the right, as quartiles increase, right? So the higher, the better the performer, higher the quartile student is, they perhaps tend to get a higher step score. Not entirely unexpected. So, similarly, we can see kind of these plots of number of honored clerkships specifically. You can see that drift up and to the right again against step 1 score. So a lot of these charts are exploring the relationship between step 1 score and other factors like research experience, clerkships honored, quartile performance. And you can see here with research, it's not as much of a correlation. It's a little bit more scattered. Everyone's kind of lumped together. Here we finally move on. It's the same as the step 1 quartile, it's just step 2 quartile. And again, you see that shift. Not all schools track quartiles, and so it's not a perfect comparison. And again, we have certain specialties selected, so keep that in mind. And I would advise you select the specialties you care about at the outset, and then you can just go through this entire process without needing to kind of redo everything. And finally, we have kind of this timeline chart, kind of an interesting graphical interface here. Not as much detail to explore, but you can see that there's kind of interview offer dates, which is kind of interesting, right? You see that for the specialties we chose, we have folks mostly in early October and mid-October, and we have nice distribution on either side. Interviews were attended in November to December. Like, most of this is pretty typical information. Looking at this, I thought it was interesting, notable perhaps, that folks had their USMLE release date, mostly, especially CK, very much concentrated in mid-September, almost everyone. And similarly with the kind of graphs here, not necessarily super useful, might be good for budgeting, things like that. Now you can see here that we've kind of run out of space on the right, so you can use this arrow, you can click it, and it'll kind of nudge it over. If you have a smaller screen, maybe you had to already do that. So you can click on Seniors Advice. Here, some free-form responses, really quite interesting, where you can choose specialties. Unfortunately, they got unselected, so everything's on, and it's survey year 2019. And so these are literally free-form responses from those who filled out the Texas STAR survey about what you should do, like their kind of general thoughts. Pretty neat, and say you want to learn about those who applied to internal medicine and their thoughts. Some of them wrote some pretty long pieces, and perhaps some good advice, some hidden gems in here. You can say, I only want those who matched, and I want them from the last 2 years. And the system's pretty quick, as you can see. It'll really do a nice job, and it seems to work quite well. So in summary, we have a search interface that lets you kind of expand and drill down into programs, and again, you can sort these columns. So you can say, I want to see what's the highest number of honored clerkships that people are getting, like what kind of programs, how many clerkships are there to even honor, right? Some big numbers going up there. You can go by summaries, by specialty, and by program, where you can filter that and select which programs and which specialties you want to look at. And then we got a number of these plots of kind of step scores against other information on the y-axis. And then finally, a little timeline information, as well as kind of these just general info and seniors advice. So there you have it, the Texas STAR system in a nutshell. Hopefully you'll find something useful here in this system. I wouldn't necessarily stake everything on it. As we mentioned before, the system is not fully inclusive of all of the applicants, right? For that, you should look at the NRMP match information, right? They publish that annually. And so with that, best of luck in your studies, your match, and your residency, and enjoy.